What's going on, everybody? Jared Sandler welcoming you into another episode of the Just a Sec Conversation. For those here for the first time, thanks so much for giving this a chance. For those back for more, I appreciate the continued support. Hope everyone's having a great day, and for those who aren't, wishing for better days ahead. We've got episode 62 for you right here, and it's with the Stanley Cup winning defenseman for the Dallas Stars, Craig Ludwig. Luds, at one point, was a part of the Stars broadcast. He's oftentimes heard on 105.3 The Fan, and I'm very thankful that Craig is a very loyal supporter of the Sandlot Children's Charity. But I think as athletes get further and further away from their playing days, maybe we forget how good they actually were. Luds was an anchor on the blue line for a number of teams. He won the Stanley Cup in '86 with Montreal, again with the Stars, and that storybook 98-99 season. And I had the chance to catch up with Craig about a lot of his experiences in the sport of hockey and beyond. As always, would appreciate if you consider subscribing. Just click on the subscribe button. Maybe click the thumbs up to like or comment. Perhaps you just want to share the link with some of your hockey friends. Whatever the case, really would appreciate the support. But here we go. Episode 62 of the Just a Sec Conversation with Craig Ludwig. All right, Luds, I'm curious. You grew up in America, and we're going to get into that, playing hockey in America. But what drew you to hockey? Why did you connect with hockey at an early age, and how did it develop into a passion it must have been for you to have the career that you had?
Up north in Wisconsin, real small town, 1,200 people. You weren't a one sport athlete, and so I was baseball, football, and hockey, and then we did track in the middle of it when there was that span where those three weren't going on, and so I had opportunities in the other two sports. I went to a Reds camp. I was invited to a camp. I had an opportunity scholarship-wise for football. I just didn't feel I was big enough at the time. And, the whole thing, I wasn't digging the whole 6 practices and 1 game a week thing in football. And, the hockey thing just kind of fell into place. Had a couple, offers for school and some small schools, and I just kind of took a leap of faith, and I went to the University of North Dakota, and I walked on, and we won 2 of the 3 years I was there. We won 2 national championships, and that all just seemed to kind of lead the right way. My kids kind of were the same thing, and I guess what I've learned is, and I kept pushing them into baseball, and and we talk about baseball, and they had some pretty good guys. Kids that they were playing with and coaching them. Jeff Russell was a coach, and Rafi's kid was on the team, and so there was some good talent around there, and I had I had calls from them, and they're telling me how good my kids were, and so I could try to push them away from hockey and into baseball, just knowing that the lifespan is a little bit longer. The money at the time was different too, but they just kept going back to hockey. They had to make a choice on a baseball game or a hockey practice, and they chose hockey practice. And so I just got to learn is you just kind of gravitate. You got to let them go, and you fall into a certain spot and certain lane, and I can't complain because it worked out for me. And I think for me, coming out of a small town, it was very important that I ended up in a program or on a team where the coaches believed in whatever kind of hidden talent or ability or size, whatever you had. The team concept was, what I needed. It wasn't a run and gun kind of offensive kind of club. It was always, I look at North Dakota, I look at Montreal, I look at Dallas, it was always based on defense first. And so if it was the other way around, I definitely wouldn't have been playing hockey. It had to come down to any kind of offensive skills. So you just kind of land where you land, and it all worked out great, so I can't complain.
All right, so you mentioned North Dakota, and you referenced 2 national championships there in 3 years before you began your professional career. I mean, college is such a fun time for a lot of reasons, and I can only imagine winning a national championship in any college sports is incredibly special. You got to experience winning Stanley Cups, and we'll get into that. But what were those experiences like, and how did you grow and benefit from your time at North Dakota, and specifically your time as a national champion?
Well, obviously, my growth was hockey related. It wasn't so much educated related. So when I went there, I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't even know if I was going to make the club. I was just trying to. I didn't like some of the advice or some of the ways that some of the smaller colleges, when they brought me in, and I didn't like it, and so I said, "The hell with you guys! I'm going to take a chance," and I did, and you know what? And it was just the first thing that blew me away at the time is when you go in as a freshman, and you're 17, 18 years old, going into as I guess you call it a true freshman, and there was about 6 freshmen on the team when I got there, and we were first day at tryouts and your dry line and stuff like that, and these guys all had beards. Full beards. I'm not talking scraggly little beards. I'm like, what the hell? Well, then I figured out that what Gino Gasparini, who was the coach there, they were bringing a lot of their kids out of major junior, and that's why they were so. We had such a great team but the freshmen were already 21 years old. They had played major junior, played in an NHL environment, so to speak, coming into the program. Gino was had a lot of connections and brought the right guys in, and so that was a bonus. I didn't have any expectations of being a regular or any of that kind of stuff going into it. And Rick Wilson, who's been a longtime Dallas coach, was my coach D coach in University of North Dakota. And you know what? It was the same kind of thing when I got to Montreal. They saw size and all that kind of stuff, and you could skate well enough to get around. You could play a physical game, and there was a spot for you. There was a place on the team, and it was always like, here's what you do. And just do that. Don't try to do something else. And I've kind of followed that my whole career. It turned into a long time. We ended up winning the national championship. Got drafted at the end of the year, and I actually laughed when I was in North Dakota doing a hockey camp in the summer. Coach came by and said, "Hey, come into my office. I need to talk to you." And I thought, well, what the hell did I do wrong again now? Because it's the summertime. We don't have a curfew. He told me I was drafted, and I said, "Oh, yeah." And he goes, I asked him by who, and he said Montreal, and I just kind of laughed, and I thought, yeah, whatever. And then, you know what, it was not the following year. The following year after that, my third year, we won the championship again, and he called me out of the locker room when we were celebrating, and long story short, he goes, remember the talk we had at the end of the first year about, your grades and all that kind of stuff that I wasn't really into? And he said, there's somebody out in the hallway I want you to meet. And I walked out in the hall, and he had originally told me, he goes, "Don't think about turning pro." And this was my fourth year, and I'm like, no, I don't even anticipate playing in the pros. And I said, don't worry about it. So he took me out in the hallway. Down the hall was a guy by the name of Bill Waters, who went on to be assistant GM for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He goes, "I want you to meet your new agent." And I said, "Huh?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I've got no more classes for you to take. So it is time for you to turn pro." And that's what happened. And I went to Montreal, and things worked out there the same kind of way. But I was, unfortunately, when I went to North Dakota, I didn't have housing. I didn't have anything. I just walked on, drove in the day of sign up, and I ended up in a house with 5 other guys that I'd never met before in my life. And that's kind of how it started. And unfortunately, when you're on a good team with older players and they want to have parties during the season and you've got a house that you live in, that's where they're at. So that was kind of my introduction, to big-time hockey in the NCAA. And again, it just kind of all fell into place, and we had a great team. And I think anytime you win any kind of a championship and then you're able to do it again, it ends up being pretty special for you.
All right, so Lud, some people maybe in various sports, they go to college knowing I'm a stud. Like college is just the next step in what's going to be a long, prosperous career. But you mentioned that you didn't even know if you were going to make the team. And here we are talking in 2020. You've won multiple Stanley Cups. You had a long, long NHL career and accomplished so much. So I know you mentioned that you were fortunate to play for teams in a program in North Dakota that maybe had a playing style that catered to your specific strengths, but was there a moment or was there something, a period of development where you went from the kid who you wasn't sure he was going to make the team to the player that you eventually became? Like, what changed or what was key in your growth as a player in that regard?
I think what I did is I listened to my head coaches, and I took their advice, and the Wills, and there's a spot here for you, and here's what we see your strengths are, and you've got to play to your strengths, and that's what I did. And everybody talks about the shot blocking and things like that. Wills had us out on the ice after every single practice, and we would be at the top of the circle, and he would be standing on the blue line with a bucket of pucks, and we would come out and we'd block shots, and he'd pound them at us, and so. It was just another rusty tool that went into my toolbox. And I think what happens is, and I've tried to tell kids, that you coach and you work with after you're done, is it's the team concept thing. And you know what, in a hockey team especially, there are certain roles everybody has. And you don't put your lineup together with all defensive players or all offensive players or all middle-of-the-road players. There's a combination of players, and I was very fortunate, number one, having coaches that believed in me, but then I also had great partners that they put me with. My first partner was Hall of Famer and legend Larry Robinson in Montreal, and Larry was, Larry could do everything. He could fight, and he was 6'6", and he could skate, and he was offensively gifted. He was unbelievably defensive. And so I got to learn from a guy like that. It was the same thing in college. James Patrick, who was, a coach here in Dallas for a while, and Jeep went on and played a long career also with the Rangers and Buffalo and things like that. And so I had that offensive guy next to me. I played with Chris Chelios in Montreal after Larry Robinson, and I come to Dallas and I get guys like Sergei Zubov. And so I knew what my role was. I knew why I was with certain players. And those players are probably a little bit more aggressive offensively. And you need to learn how to play a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2. I always talk about Zuby all the time. And I had a little discussion with Hitch one day when he was giving Zuby a hard time on the bench. He didn't make the right play, he felt, in the neutral zone. And, Zuby was an east-west player, and with Hitch, you kind of want to play north-south. You play straight lines, you get the puck in, you go forecheck, you hit, you turn it over, and then you play good defense. And, my thought process was, listen, I'm playing with Zuby for a reason, and he makes, out of 10 plays, 8 of them to 9 of them are incredible plays. And the 1 or 2 that don't turn out the way that he wanted it to, and it turns into an outnumbered rush back towards me, I've got to be one of the best guys to be able to shut that down. So I knew what my role was, and I stayed with that. I got that advice when I left college. Head coach told me, he goes, listen, you got drafted because of the way that you play. So many players will go to the next level, and they want to impress the coaches, the staff, by stepping outside of what they do well. And it just digs them a bit of a hole to have a talk with the coach. The coach say, hey, listen, this is what you do. And then they still think they need to impress. And eventually the coaches, scouting staffs will go, the kid just doesn't get it. And so I just kind of listened, when I got to college, to what they, in their minds, the player that I was. Obviously they were right. I didn't change it when I got to the pros, and I stayed with it my whole career. And I was able to, find roles on those teams, and it was a part that they were looking for. And it's, you're not going to get the headlines, which in my case, I remember some of the best advice I've ever gotten was when you get up the next day and you look through the paper or you're listening to the sports report, and when you don't hear your name, you had a great game that night. And basically what they're saying is you didn't make any major mistakes. And so I had to play as close to, the kind of game that I was able to play, but mistake-free. It wasn't going to be, flashy. You're not going to see me up the ice. And because if I did that, I'd have turned the puck over. And now I would have taken somebody, put him in a situation that wasn't to his strength. Not that a guy like Zubov or Chelios didn't know how to play a 2-on-1 or 3-on-2 or whatever it may be, but that's not what my role was. And so I just kind of stuck with it, got on the right team with the right kind of coaches all the time, had a spot that they were looking for to kind of, put you into that role. And here's what we need. You just continue doing what you're doing, and you're going to be a part of the solution. And we've got a couple holes, and we think you can fill it. And so I lived by that. I stayed with it, and it all paid off.
All right, now you won a cup in Montreal. People in DFW know you better for your role on some really good Stars teams, including the cup-winning team in '99. What's something that you think people need to know about that team? Whether it's the identity, maybe it's something that doesn't get talked about as much. Maybe it does get talked about, but it's so important to you. What stands out to you about that team?
Well, the first thing that hits you in the face is just when you look at the roster and how many Hall of Famers we had. And so when you have 5 or 6 Hall of Famers and you've got a whole Hall of Fame goaltender on your team, you've got a Mike Modano, you've got a Brett Hull, and then you take a guy like Yuri Lettman and put him on the wing with those two guys. And again, there's your role. Those two guys are the offensive guys. Letts has won 3 or 4 Selkies for being one of the best Selkie guys in history, and who's he learning from or who's helping him is Guy Carbonneau. Bob Gainey, your general manager, has won 6, 7 Stanley Cups. He knows what he's looking for. He brings Carbo in, and Carbo was a defensive centerman, and you had a bunch of guys that were hungry, and you had a bunch of guys that win. But I think that one of the lessons that come out of it, when you win a championship, you win it. For the most part, you win it because of your best players, but you don't win it without the rest of them. And the rest of us were as much of that room and that team as the superstars, and vice versa. And we had great leadership. There were 3 or 4 of us that wore letters, but there were 10 other guys that could have had a letter on. That was the kind of group that we had in the locker room. And we had strong voices. And we had guys that had won before. I think that's always a big key, and I think you see a lot of GMs will try to do that. As Bob was putting this team together, over the years leading up to it, we were getting close, and there were just a couple pieces that were missing. But it was always role players. And I remember the summer that we signed Hully, and I had never known Brett that well, except to play against him and have him, drill me in the leg a few times and score too many goals when I was probably in the ice, playing against him. But I remember hearing it on the news. I was sitting on my boat in Wisconsin, or maybe I got a call. I can't remember what it was, but I immediately called somebody in our staff and I said, "What's Hull's number?" And I called him up right away, and I was excited. And I said, "Man, you could be the piece." And then ironically, look at what happened. He's the guy that scores that goal. So, but you know what? And Hully, and this is to Hully's credit. Hully was the kind of guy, and I don't want to forget about a guy like Joe Nieuwendyk either. I mean, look at what Newey did. I mean, again, you can go down the list and think about how many superstars we had, but Hully was the guy that when you played against him, when he was with the Blues especially, he needed a roadmap to find his own zone. I mean, he was not the guy that was coming back into his own end. And now all of a sudden you get to Dallas and you've got a coach like Hitchcock in our system. It wasn't easy to get, to reprogram Hully. I mean, sometimes you got to deprogram him before you can program him. And that we had many talks. I mean, I had tons of talks with Hitch. I mean, it was about, we got to pull Brett in. And we're not asking Brett to turn into Yuri Lettman or Guy Carbonneau, but this is how we play, and it's all through the lineup. And you may not get as many minutes and as many offensive, situations, power, all this other kind of stuff that you normally do because this is the kind of team we have. But at the end of the day, there's something that's been missing up to that point for Hully was that ring. And come here, buy in. And it takes time for everybody that comes to a new team. And credit to Hully. I mean, there were some things that we had to do. I mean, I look at a guy that was so underrated, Mike Keane. And Keener was a guy that, we had won a cup and he had won them in Montreal. And, just another example of another guy that you bring in that has that experience, because in the NHL, at least, the playoffs are totally different than the regular season. And, it's a grind for sure, but then it truly is war of attrition when you get into the playoffs and you're playing every other night for 2 weeks against the same opponent. And at the time, the game was a little bit different. And, so you do your best to get under everybody else's skin on the other side, and you make them pay in different ways, and it's not verbal. So, you had to have guys that were durable, and you had to have guys that would play through anything. And we had a group of guys that, Mo played and his wrist wasn't right, and Hully wasn't right. And, nobody's right when you head into the playoffs anyways after 82 games. But, guys have to be willing to play through, some adversity and some pains. And I look at Mike. I mean, I look at Mo. I mean, when Mo was in Minnesota, there were times where, Mike would take a hit and he wouldn't pop up right away. Let's put it that way. And I remember one day specifically, Mo went down and our trainer went to jump on the ice, and Gainey was actually coaching at the time in Minnesota, and he grabbed our trainer by the belt buckle and said, "Nope, let him sit there." And he pulled our trainer right back. And that was just it was an early lesson for Mike early on in his pro career, is that you're going to be an important player in this league, and you've got to set an example. And and then as the years went on, Mo played through a lot of pain, but it took somebody like a Bob Gainey who had been through it, to bring that out and to be able to say, hey, we got 19 other guys here that see things that you do, and you have to set a tone for everybody else on your own club. And so, we had an older team. I think actually, I'm not sure, but we may have had the oldest team in the league.
I think you guys were, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll say this, and I look at the Stars now, and I know that I think they've got one of the oldest, if not the oldest in the league. But it was different when we played than today. Today is such a speed game. And it's fast and it's exciting. It's skilled. We were really good at slowing things down, and we could clog up the middle. We had a couple, obviously, some good goaltenders everywhere I played. I had good goaltenders, and we knew that if we made it difficult and we didn't give up high quality scoring chances, the few that we did as a group, our goalies were going to make those saves. And if they had to make, one or two unbelievable saves in the course of a game as a group of guys, we thought those were too many. The coaches didn't need to tell us. And so we would tighten things up and we would let them see their shots. And so we were all on the same page. But it doesn't, you've heard the stories about different players over the years that we've had here in Dallas, all great guys on and off the ice. But I will say this, is we probably, as hard as we played on the ice, a lot of us played just as hard off the ice. but that actually brings you together. What you do off the ice, I think, together sometimes is even more important than what happens off the ice, because it brings you that much closer. And there's adversity in all different areas, and we were able to fight through it.
So speaking of off the ice, I thought I heard a story, and I don't remember if it was specifically during the Stanley Cup final series or just the playoffs that year, that in between games you went to you left the state, maybe even the country, to go see a Pantera concert quickly. Did that happen?
You know what? You're just tap dancing around the rim. You know exactly what happened. You just want me to tell it.
Well, okay, no, I was it. Did you go to Mexico?
Yeah, you know what? After the first round, this is the year we won. So after the first round, I believe we had swept that round. So, we had 6-7 days probably before our next game one would start. And then when that happens, you end up having 3 days off or so, 3 complete days away from the rink. And long story short, but Vinny had called me up. Vinny Paul called me. He's one of my buddies here, and he always has been. And so anyway, called me up and just said, hey, I'll be at the airport tomorrow morning. And this is after we got back from wherever it was, Edmonton. He called me back up, and he just said, hey, be at the airport at 6 o'clock tomorrow. I'm like, huh? And he goes, you're coming with us. And I said, we're in the playoffs. We can't go there. But he knew the schedule all the time. He knew when, because he would always, hey, where are we going tonight after the game? You guys probably got an optional tomorrow, all that kind of stuff. And he goes, well, you told me you had 3 days off if you win this game. And I said, yeah. So he said, and he knew I was a Metallica fan at the time, and he goes, hey, we're going to go to Mexico City. We're playing with Metallica, and come on along. And so I said, no. I sat there for 5 minutes, called him back and said, what time? And ultimately I hopped on a plane, went to Mexico City, spent the night there with, all those idiots, and then made it back in time. And I, that story started coming out about a year or two ago, I guess is what it was. I'm not even sure when it came out, but I figured, I've been out of the game long enough. I can probably tell the truth now of what happened, especially the way it turned out. We won the cup that year, and so no harm, no foul, I guess.
Yeah, I think it all worked out, right?
Yeah, except, the only thing is I go in after, and I'm sitting with Hetfield, and we were talking for a little while, and Lars was in there after we were done and talking, and Hetfield says to me, he goes, "Hey, you want an autograph?" Or autograph picture? I said, "Sure, I'd love it." He signs a picture, I take it, and I stick it in a, it was one of them 8x10s or whatever it was, stick it, and I opened it up about 2-3 weeks later, or maybe it was even in the summer, and I looked at it, and it said, "Hey, Les, thanks for coming, whatever, great to see you." And then he signs his name, and then it says "Go Sharks" on the bottom of it. I didn't even realize he was a San Jose fan at the time. So, but it's still, it was still a good time. And like I said, Vinny and I, in Dime, we spent some time together. So, it was nice to be able to, do something out of the ordinary, or probably out of the question. And as long as nothing happened, except the good end result, everything's fine.
So, the Dallas Stars song that Pantera created is still a big part of the Stars and the in-game entertainment presence. When they score a goal and it around that time, the Stanley Cup run, it became a big thing, and Stars fans took such a source of pride out of it. What did you guys think of the song? I know that you guys thought very favorably of it. I think there was some superstition attached to it, but how important was that song for you guys in the locker room during that run?
Well, it was important enough that when we were playing, I think when we beat St. Louis in overtime to finish the series, that we didn't go on the ice until the song arrived. Somehow that year, or a couple years, or whatever it was, I was kind of doing the music in the locker room for whatever reason that you listen to and warm up and after the game, stuff like that. And we had been talking. We wanted something different, and we needed to find a song for playoffs. A lot of that comes from Philly. I remember every time we'd be in Philly, especially when I was in Montreal, you'd step on the ice and you'd hear them play "Welcome to the Jungle," and when you played Philly in those days, that's all they needed was a little more boost, because you knew you were going to get run the whole game anyways. So anyways, I talked to Vinny and Diamond. Went over their house, I don't know, maybe it was a month before, and just talked to them about, listen, we need something. And those two guys banged that thing out in less than 24 hours. And so he called me up the day later and said, listen, I'm going to send you something. I want you to listen to it. I did. Then I went over to his house, picked up a CD from him, and took it into the locker room and just played it for the guys. And you know what? I don't think it took 30 seconds, and I was just looking around. They were all smiling. I said, "What do you think?" And they were like, "Yeah, that's what we're going to use." And so that was our song before we'd head out onto the ice for warm up, and that was our song that we would head onto the ice after warm up, heading out for the opening of the game, and then heading into the St. Louis series. One of the trainers actually forgot to pack the CD, and there was panic, and so we had to call Vinny, and somehow, it got overnighted. There was a storm and all this other kind of stuff, and it didn't get there for warm up. And and I was getting updates. Our trainers were giving me updates. Somebody called, the couriers got it. They just got to the airport, and they're coming in this snowstorm or whatever it was at the time. And I remember Hitch coming in, and we were all sitting. We didn't go out for the start of the game. I mean, when you go on, you got a 2-minute buzzer, and everybody kind of starts heading out. We were still sitting there. Hitch comes waddling in and kind of naturally looked at me, and he was like, "What the hell's going on?" And I said, "Well, it's coming, Hitch." He goes, because he knew about it. And I said, he goes, "Got to go." And I said, "No." I said, it's almost in the building. And I said, "I think they're running it down." So anyways, we got it. We got on the ice a little bit late for the start of the game. We got to probably put it in, hit play, and probably within 10 seconds, whoever normally goes out on the ice kind of stood up. And so we got to hear our song, and that was the game that we won in overtime to, finish that round. So, and that is the superstition, or whatever you want to call it. And so there's a reason, I was on that float in the parade. They had their own float, Vinny and Dime and all those guys, and they had their float. And so, we look back, and they were as much a part of, that's the way we feel, they were as much a part of, winning that Stanley Cup as anything, because, that was our thing. And so it's nice to know that it continues to live on. And, I'd even remember talking to Vinny a few years ago to see if he would be interested in kind of freshening it up for the new guys. And, so just kind of, is there something we could do different to it, keep the same thing, but since that was us back then, is there something we can do with them? And I could tell he was a little bit reluctant to do it, and mainly because, Dime was gone already. And I don't blame him. I even told him, I said, "Man, I get it if you don't want to change this thing." And He goes, no, let me think about it. And so ultimately it stayed the same. And so, a lot of us are still happy about it because, I think when you find something, it's tough to change it.
Well, there you go. Episode 62 of the Just a Sec Conversation. Really appreciate Luds for taking the time and hope you enjoyed. We've got plenty of more episodes in the future, so subscribe to the channel. You can get alerts when the episodes come out. Would appreciate if you would like, comment, or just share the link with anyone who you think might enjoy this conversation or some of the others. And browse the channel. We got all sorts of content, not just these interviews. Take a peek. Hopefully you find something you like. Thanks again for tuning in. Until we talk next, stay safe, be healthy, and we'll talk soon.